Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So today's lecture is on the treatment with insulin in diabetes mellitus. And the objectives of today's lecture is to go through an overview of insulin development, pharmacokinetics, and types of insulin, factors affecting insulin action, insulin regimes, mixed basal bolus, insulin pump, etc., and what does the ADA and ACE algorithm has to say. So basically, insulin was developed in the past through non-human sources, that is through animal sources, that is cows and pigs. That's how we get the bovine and pig-related insulin in the past. Now, insulin for human use comes from recombinant DNA technology. The benefits of this human-related insulin is that large quantities of insulin can be produced. Amino acid structure is identical to that of human insulin, and modification of the human amino acid sequence to produce desirable pharmacodynamic properties can be achieved. And obviously, there would be lesser degree of any side effects and lesser degree of any allergic or such type of reactions. Now coming to the pharmacokinetic pharmacokinetics of available insulin preparations, depending on the chemical nature of the particular insulin preparation, the various formulations of insulin, they differ. They differ according to the rapidity of their onset of action, the time from injection to peak action, the duration of action, and the available insulins can be divided on a pharmacokinetic profile into three broad categories, that is rapid acting, intermediate, and long acting. So let's start with rapid acting insulins. They have an onset of action of 1 hour or less and are used to reduce the peak glycemia that occurs after meal ingestion. So number one is the regular insulin. This consists of zinc insulin crystals dissolved in a clear fluid. After subcutaneous injection, it dissociates from its hexameric form first into dimers and then into monomers. Only the monomeric and the dimeric forms pass into the circulation. The resulting relative delay in onset and duration of action therefore limits its effectiveness, because first it has to be dissociated in subcutaneous tissue and then gets into the circulation. So that's why we say that the onset of action is usually 2 to 4 hours in case of regular insulin. Whereas in insulin analogs, there are different types. Number one is the insulin Lispro. This is a recombinant, this is from the recombinant, has a recombinant DNA origin. It is created by reversal of the amino acids at positions 28 and 29 on the human insulin B chain. As you can see here, you can see that the position 28 and 29 are reversed. So insulin Lispro was the first insulin analog to receive approval from the FDA. It is created in a special non-pathogenic laboratory strain of E. coli that has been genetically altered by the addition of the gene for insulin Lispro. I hope you can appreciate how the lysine amino acid has replaced the proline here in the human insulin, and the proline has replaced the lysine. So this is a reversal of the amino acid, simple reversal, and how the property of the insulin analog is changed. Another type of analog insulin, which is also a short-acting and rapid-acting insulin, is insulin aspart. This differs from human insulin by substitution of aspartic acid for proline in position B28. Here you can see B28 is where there is proline. Here the aspart in the lower part of the figure has replaced proline from aspartic acid. I hope you can appreciate. So after the insulin aspart, there is insulin glulicine. That is again insulin where there is substitution of lysine for asparagine at position B3. and of glutamic acid for the lysine. So the above figure here actually belongs to glulicine here, this one. So there are two substitutions for asparagine. There is substitution of lysine, as you can appreciate in here, number 3. And at position number 29, there is substitution of glutamic acid for lysine, as you can see here. So there are 2 amino acid substitution in glulicine, 1 amino acid substitution in aspartate, and reversal of amino acid substitution in the Lispro form. So these are the 3 main analog rapid acting insulin. You should know them. They can be asked in your exams, so be aware of their properties. Moving on to another type of ultra rapid acting insulin analog. This is also FDA approved. Insulin aspart injection, 100 units per ml, a fast acting mealtime insulin indicated for type 1 and type 2 diabetes both. Fiasp can be dosed at the beginning of a meal or within 20 minutes after starting a meal. So it acts very, very fast. So this is a fast acting insulin aspart. That's why it is called Fiasp. This is now a new formulation of no-log, that is aspart insulin, in which the addition of niacinamide helps to increase the speed of the initial insulin absorption with the appearance in the blood in just 2.5 minutes. So it is too rapid and too quick to act. You just have to inject it and patient can just start the meal straight away. Fiasp is available in a pre-filled delivery device like Flex Touch Pen and a 10 ml vial. So it is available both in the vial form as well as in the pre-filled delivery device. This is the formula. This is the picture which shows Fiasp, that is faster aspart. And you can see that niacinamide is added to the aspart chain, the insulin chain actually, where this is making it stable, as well as the L-arginine is added for the stability, as well as the niacinamide is speeding up the absorption parameter. So what are the pros and cons of these analogs? First of all, it reduces the self-aggregation in subcutaneous tissue as observed in the regular insulin. So behaves similar to that of monomeric insulin, and it acts quickly. Next, it is more rapid. It has more rapid absorption and shorter duration of action compared with regular insulin. Not intrinsically more active, and on a molar basis is equipotent to human insulin. So it's not something like it is more active, more efficacious, but it has a quicker action, more feasibility, and such type of thing. With IV injection, if you compare it, pharmacokinetics are just like human insulin. Obviously, it is costly. It also has lower risk of hypoglycemia, especially during the sleep. And it may be injected immediately before or after meals instead of waiting for 30 or 60 minutes before meals as compared to the regular insulins. Now coming to the intermediate and long-acting insulins. These insulins have a significantly longer delay in their onset of action as well as the duration of action. In the setting of type 1 diabetes, they should always be used in combination with a rapid-acting form of insulin because you need a basal bolus type of regime to, simulate the natural pancreatic pattern. They are usually administered before bedtime and are titrated to produce normal glucose levels throughout the night, as well as in the fasting state. Number one type of intermediate acting insulin is neutral protamine H-non. In fact, it is the only type which is further modified along with the analog insulin preparations in the mixtures. So the NPH is a crystalline suspension of insulin with protamine and zinc. It provides an intermediate onset of action in 1 to 3 hours, duration of action up to 24 hours, and peak action up from 6 to 8 hours. So it can have a linger-on effect up to 24 hours. However, we usually observe in clinical practice that it lasts for 12 to 14 hours, especially if we are seeing some resistant type of diabetes where insulin requirement is also increasing. Usually administered in combination with rapid-acting insulin, we all know that. Now, largely it is supplanted by analog type of insulin because of a perceived lower risk of hyperglycemia. So NPH has a property, to cause rapid hypos And when you're giving higher doses, you have to be really careful with the fact that patient does not skip the meal and there are no long gaps in between meals too. Another type of long-acting insulin is insulin glargine. This is a recombinant human insulin analog that provides 24-hour duration of action in most patients. It differs from human insulin that the amino acid asparagine at position A21 is replaced by glycine, as you can see here. And the two arginines are added to the carboxy terminus of the B chain. Here, the two arginine molecules are added. You can see in the figure. This is the picture of the insulin glargine. Now, what are the disadvantages of glargine? We know the advantages because it is long-acting, it is analog, it is modified. But because this insulin is provided in an acid vehicle, it cannot be mixed with other forms of insulin or intravenous fluids. So it has to be given in a separate form anyway and always. Some patients have greater discomfort with injection at least some of the time. So patients often complain of pain, that whenever I inject my glargine, I get a discomfort and I get a pain. If patient can tolerate it, then you may continue. But if the patient has a lot of discomfort and is intolerable and has hesitancy, then you must change the type of insulin. In about 10% of patient, insulin glargine must be taken twice daily to provide 24-hour coverage of basal needs. In a smaller percentage of patients, a modest peak in effect occurs 2 to 6 hours after injection, and this can result in nocturnal hypoglycemia. So it is an advanced insulin, but it may still have some lacking, to get into optimization to perfection. Coming to the next type of long-acting insulin, that is insulin betamer. This differs from human insulin in that the threonine in position B30 has been eliminated, and a C14 fatty acid chain has been attached to the amino acid B29. You can appreciate here very well that the arrow shows that threonine is being kicked off, and at position B29, a fatty acid chain is attached. This gives us its property of stabilization and slow release into the circulation, giving it a property of long-acting analog insulin. Now, coming to the pros and cons of dejamer, it is soluble both in the vial and under the skin, causing more consistent absorption after subcutaneous injection. So it is a kind of a soluble insulin. In comparison to NPH, there is less weight gain. In fact, some trials have actually shown that patients experience weight loss, and it reduces the risk of hypoglycemia. So dejamer is clearly, a bit different from glargine in the fact that two main issues with glargine were mainly the risk of hypoglycemia, and there was some risk of, requiring twice a day insulin, which is also possible in dejamer, however. But as compared to NPH or other type of, regular or human insulins, it has less tendency to cause weight gain in some conscious type of patients. Now, there are other novel basal insulins coming up, and I've shown here 2 examples, but I'm sure there are still more on the way to come. So you can see here insulin degludec, which is, famously marketed by the name of Tresiba, and the other one is insulin glargine, which is in more concentrated form, 300 units per ml. So you can get almost 900 of units in a single pen, which is marketed by the name of Toujeo. So the glargine, U300 and Tresiba, as well as pegylated insulin Lispro, these are the other novel basal insulins. They provide extended durations of action, less and less within day and day-to-day variability in pharmacodynamics, and promise greater reductions in hypoglycemic risk, lesser weight gain, and potential improvements in the glycemic control. So I have practically used them and have experienced that these advanced insulin, the Toujeo and the Tresiba, which is shown here, they clearly have improvement in glycemic control and lesser risk of hypoglycemia compared to other long-acting insulins. This next insulin you here see the pegylated Lispro. It is not marketed in our country yet, but it is FDA, and FDA has not approved this medication for use yet, but it is there in the literature, and it was planned to be, produce, half-life is approximately 2 to 3 days, has a hepatopreferential effect. This is also a type of, a chemical formula of long-acting insulin. Here you can see the deglutec in human insulin, the deglutec, and here you can see the glargine, which is actually the primer injection was Lantus, is now more concentrated form. The more concentrated form of U300 is shown here. It forms a compact subcutaneous depot with a smaller surface area to produce more gradual and prolonged release as compared to Lantus. This is like a summary of all the fast-acting and long-acting insulin. Different colors show different types of analog insulins, which are short-acting as well as long-acting. Lispro is here, as I've told you, that this is after the reversal of the amino acid sequence, and then there is aspartic acid for aspart, and there is glycine attachment for glycine replacement for glulicine, for glargine, and arginine molecule attachment, and then there is a carboxy C14 fatty acid chain attachment to B29 for determer. This is a summary of the pharmacokinetic properties of insulin preparations and their onset of action, their peak hour of action, and their duration is shown. As you can see, the short-acting insulins mostly last for 3-4 hours, and only the regular insulin still has a prolonged duration. Coming to the longer acting down in the table, they are lasting up to 1 to 2 days, and such formulas are being produced to have more long-acting insulin. In fact, now weekly insulin and oral insulins are also in the way of production. So let's see what insulin formulas we have to see in the near future. Now, coming to the alternative routes of insulin administration. So far, we have learned about the insulin injection forms, insulin in the injection forms. Now, what are the alternative routes? There have been numerous alternative routes which have been examined. The only commercially available formulation is an inhaled formulation of regular human insulin loaded in the fumarate diketopiperazine microparticles. And this produces peak insulin level in 20 minutes, and with peak activity lasting 1 hour and terminal half-life for another 1 hour. So as I was talking about the alternative route, that the oral formulation is also on the way. We already have this another inhaled formulation in the market. This is FDA approved. We have 2 products so far in the market. That is, one of them is Exubera and the other is Afrezza. Exubera is from the Pfizer company and Afrezza from the Mankind Corporation. But they are not very famously used. So factors affecting insulin action. Dose of insulin injected, larger doses of insulin may be absorbed more slowly than smaller doses. Site of injection, insulin is absorbed fastest from the abdominal area, slowest from the leg and buttock, and at an intermediate rate from the arm. Smoking and physical activity also affect the absorption. That is, any factor that alter the rate of blood flow through the skin and fat will change insulin absorption. Smoking decreases the blood flow, and exercise, sauna, hot bath, and massage of the insulin site may increase the insulin absorption and can result in hypoglycemia. So one has to be very careful when proceeding towards exercise type of activities to make sure it has taken extra carbohydrate snack to avoid hypoglycemia. So these are the factors which affect the insulin action. This is a picture which shows the famous and important insulin injection site. One has to remember. The picture on the right side here can show you the areas. This is the periumbilical abdominal surface area, the lateral and front of the thigh, and the lateral surfaces of the arms, and also the upper part of the back of the buttocks. Here you can see the picture which shows how to inject, how to give an insulin shot. So pinch up some skin and quickly insert the needle at 90-degree angle, or whatever angle your doctor or nurse tells you. Keep the skin pinched to avoid having insulin go into the muscle. So you have to keep it up to into the subcutaneous part of the tissue. Push the plunger down all the way, hold the syringe and needle in place for 5 seconds, let go the pinched skin and remove the needle from the skin. If the blood or clear fluid comes where the shot was given, press on the area for 5 to 8 seconds, but do not rub, and do not necessarily, apply alcohol swab repeatedly to clean the blood. So once you press it, the blood or the oozing will go away. Time since opening the bottle. Now, these are the factors which continue the insulin action. Time since opening the bottle. Most insulin remains potent and effective for up to a month after the bottle has been opened, and if kept in the refrigerator between injection time. How it is visible to start a new bottle at least every 30 days. So after 30 days, just discard the bottle. For very rapid acting insulin used in pen injectors, it is acceptable to keep the pen injector at room temperature in a purse or jacket pocket for up to 14 days, provided that the pen is not exposed to extremes of temperatures. So we always advise our patient, because our patient often travel to the interior part of the, Sindh and Punjab, where there is a very hot climate, hot temperature going on. So they often ask, they have to travel. So can they carry on the pen with them? So I always, advise them that make sure that you're not exposing yourself to extremes of temperature, and if so, if your vehicle, the traveling the car or the whatever the vehicle you're traveling in, if that is air conditioned and you can keep the temperature nominal, then that's okay. But if you're exposing yourself to hot climates especially, then this would not work, and then you need ice packs for the insulin pen as well. Now, coming to the approaches to the treatment of type 1 diabetes, how now you are going to start with various. Now we've learned what are the different types of insulins, what are their actions, what are their, pros and cons. So now we are dealing with the patient practically, how we have to give these insulin types. Coming to the type 1 type of diabetes in the first. Levels of glucose control equivalent to those achieved in the intensive group in the DCC trial. They're not possible in most patients unless a multi-drug insulin regime combining rapid and long-acting insulin or a continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion is used. So they're referring to the DCC trial, which is for the type 1 diabetic, where they concluded that unless the patient has been put on multi-drug insulin regime or a continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion, that is insulin pump they are talking about, the intensive control was not possible. More important is the need for the patient to adjust the insulin dose depending on the self-monitored glucose levels, dietary intake, and physical activity. The exogenous insulin regime needs to stimulate the multiphasic profile of insulin secretory responses to meals and snacks that is present in normal subjects. So you see, I already talked with you about the natural multiphasic profile of insulin secretion from the pancreas. It should simulate the same, especially in type 1 diabetic. We cannot afford to have, the fluctuations which are more prominent and pronounced in case of type 1. Here you can see, this is the normal blood glucose profile, which comes with the passage of time. Normally we get a surge in the breakfast, lunch. These red curves, they tell you the breakfast, lunch, and dinner peaks in sugars, whereas this yellow curve shows you that there is a continuous glucose production even when you're not eating or you're fasting. There is a basal glucose production from the liver, from the kidney, and so on, to provide the glucose to the brain, especially. Similarly, we are supposed to have the insulin surge along to cover up these blood glucose surges in the body. So combination of rapid acting and intermediate acting insulin with breakfast and dinner. This is a type of insulin regime which is still offered to type 1 diabetics. And now what is the rationale behind that? The rapid acting insulin limits the postprandial glucose rise after breakfast and dinner, whereas the intermediate acting insulin administered before breakfast limits the glycemia in the afternoon, and before dinner limits glycemia in the early hours of the morning. So this type of regime is often used in in daily practice for type 1 as well as type 2 patients. However, as I told you, the basal bolus, the 3 bolus injection and the 1 basal injection or basal regime is more preferred because that simulates the natural pancreatic secretory response. Now, let's come to some caveats which affect insulin treatments in patients who are totally insulin dependent for their glycemic control. One of them is Down phenomena, and the other is Samogio effect. These are two important, concepts which one has to understand when you are reading or learning about insulin treatments in diabetes. So dawn phenomena is a surge in insulin requirement 3 to 4 hours before waking up in the morning. This is mainly due to increased amplitude and frequency of growth hormone pulses, but also coincides with the natural rise in cortisol levels. In about 30% of people, this causes more than 30% increase in insulin requirements. Whereas the Samogio effect, which is also called rebound hyperglycemia, this refers to the pattern of blood glucose being high in the morning after having been low. That is, there is a phenomenon of hypoglycemia which leads to hyperglycemia. That's why it is called rebound hyperglycemia. Usually there are no symptoms, but occasionally patient can tell you that I was sweating over the night. So night sweats can be a very important sign in such cases. The causes include excess or ill-timed insulin, missed meals or snacks, and inadvertent insulin administration. So you have to really ask these factors from the patient, whether they took the insulin on the right time as prescribed in the night, or maybe the patient has taken it at a very early hour or very late, and has actually not eaten well, has not taken the usual snack he or she is supposed to. So you have to ask these factors from the patient to clearly know. And to document that there is actually hypoglycemia, sometimes you have to ask the patient to wake up at night, maybe 2 to 3 hours after going to sleep, and check his or her blood sugar at that time, so as to see if there is actual documentation of hypoglycemia or not. Usually patient would tell you that this is the time when I get sweaty, or when I wake up with some discomfort feeling, and often I have to go and eat something. So tell the patient to check his or her blood sugar at that time. Okay, so solution of caveats. Attempt to increase the dose of intermediate acting insulin at dinner expose the patient to a greater risk of hypoglycemia in the middle of the night. Hence, there is a need for a smaller dose at bedtime to provide sufficient insulin to restrain the dawn phenomena the following morning while moderating the risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia. So the counseling and effective diabetes education is the best solution for correcting rebound hyperglycemia in both types of issues, whether it is dawn phenomena or whether it is, a Samogio effect. You have to counsel the patient, tell the patient the reason behind it so that you can come up to a solution. Although dawn phenomena would require more insulin, but why? Why do you want to increase the 30% requirement when the patient can take the insulin at the right time and can actually overall give a insight into why the glycemic control is deteriorating? Whereas for the Samogio effect, you don't want any risk of hypoglycemia during sleep. So it's all about counseling and educating the patient, talk with the patient, try to dig out the solution through communication. Combination of rapid acting insulin given mid-meals and long acting insulin at bedtime. So this is the regime that I was talking about, which is mostly simulating the pattern of insulin production that occurs normally. And use of monomeric insulin analogs provides excellent meal coverage, bolus coverage for 2 to 3 hours. And use of long-acting insulin at bedtime provides excellent control of the fasting plasma glucose level, as well as the rest of the day. Largely supplanted human insulin-based treatment regimes because it seems to be associated with less variability in glycemic control and lower risk of hypoglycemia. So they are talking about the analog insulins, which are rapid and long-acting, and they have this benefit of low risk of hypoglycemia. So this is how a basal bolus regime is supposed to work, whether you're giving a long acting or whether you're giving the NPH type of insulin, which acts for 12 to 13 hours, which you have to give in twice, as you can see here through the green graphical line. And the rapid acting or the human insulin can be given just before meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So this is how a basal bolus or 4 injection regime usually work. Now coming to the insulin premixes. These are the 2 varieties which I have shown here. They are available in the market with these brands, regular and intermediate, in the form of Novolin and Humulin, and analog premix insulin in the form of Humalog and Novomix types of insulins. So they usually work in this way. They are covering up for the 3 meals and for the rest of the day through 2 injections. So 1 injection is given before breakfast and the other is given before supper or dinner. And the rapid acting component is shown by the white, and the long acting component is shown by the green here. This is a example of the 3 type of injections per day. So the rapid acting is given along with the long intermediate acting in before breakfast. This will cover up for the lunch as well as breakfast, both. The other injection, the second injection, is given before dinner, which is shown here by the white graph. And then at the bedtime, you can give the intermediate acting insulin, which is shown here by another green graphical line. So these are the 3 injections. This is a different type of regime. So you have to be selective and choosy and understand the type of patient, their types of meals, their patterns, which will affect them. This will come on with practice only. I think this is probably the last topic of my lecture. Here you can see this is about the insulin pump, insulin administration by an external insulin pump. This is an alternative method of delivering insulin by an external mechanical pump. This involves administering a rapid-acting insulin prepared by continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion through a catheter that is inserted into the subcutaneous tissues of the anterior abdominal wall. Pump delivers insulin as a pre-programmed basal infusion in addition to patient-directed boluses given before meals or snacks or in response to elevations in the blood glucose concentration outside the desired range. I hope you can appreciate the figure here, which shows the components of an insulin pump. This is the main operating pump, which has a battery, which has a reservoir of insulin. This you can see here, the pump reservoir. This is inserted over here in this part of the machine. This is the catheter tube or plastic tube or infusion set, which is through which the insulin goes into the subcutaneous tissue. And this is the cannula over here. This rounded white part is the cannula, which is inserted into the skin. This is just an overview of how the insulin pump and what its components are, how the insulin pump works. There are more details to be discussed, which is not possible in this lecture. And this is how a continuous infusion or insulin pump works. And you can see how beautifully it just simulates the natural pancreatic insulin secretions. Lastly, I know the picture is not very clear, but I just wanted to inform that there are algorithms by the ADA which can guide you how to, to optimize the glycemic control using insulins, various type of insulin regimes, how to get into the A1C target. This is by algorithm by the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists. They tell you how to titrate the insulin dose to come to the glycemic control, which is not at goal. So you can go through them, you can read them and keep them in your clinics, in your practices, so that you can optimize your patient's glycemic control. With that, thank you very much, and that is the end.